Thank you, Chairwoman Luna. I want to note, first, thank you to the witnesses that are here. Now, as the task force continues its work, we need to continue to follow the facts and provide transparency for the American people. I think we can all agree that this task force was not set up to chase conspiracy theories, and I'm glad, of course, to have Chairwoman Luna reiterate that. It's responsible, though, for us to focus on declassification of historical records, and that allows, as we all know, the public to gain a better understanding of the past, can restore trust in our institutions, and ensures accountability in our shared government. Now, on March 18, 2025, the National Archives and Records released more than 77,000 pages related, of course, to the November 22nd, 1963 assassination of President Kennedy. Now, we know that many of these documents, most in fact, were already in the public record, but continued work to make the documents more accessible is important and valuable. Now, over the past several decades, our government has collected and released almost 6 million pages of documents consistent with President John F. Kennedy and the Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. Now, together, we should push back on decades of overclassification relating not to just the JFK assassination, but a variety of subjects. We should be very clear, and it should be done in a bipartisan way, that the FBI and the CIA of the 1960s were deeply flawed institutions. And while they have taken lessons from their past trespasses, there is no question that they have continued to often overclassify information, often out of an unnecessary abundance of caution. And it's also important to note that the FBI and CIA did harm in numerous areas over the last few decades, particularly when you look at the time of the civil rights movement. Now, transparency is how we ensure accountability and trust. The American people have the right to know as much as possible about what our government does and how our tax dollars are spent in a way that doesn't, of course, interfere with national security. Now, I understand the interest in a second hearing on President Kennedy's assassination, but I hope our task force can continue to work in a bipartisan way on the many other topics under its purview that are also important to the public. Now, as we hear testimony from our witnesses today, I want to make sure that we remember that President Kennedy's assassination is more than a historical event. It was also a human tragedy. President Kennedy was a husband, a father, a brother, and a son. Revisiting and relitigating a tragic killing is also painful for the real people that were impacted and for the family, and I think it's important to uplift that. We should be respectful and responsible as we work to address the public's questions about this tragedy, and we know that President Kennedy's legacy has made America the country that it is today. Now, at a time when we're looking, of course, and the majority is pushing for tax cuts, oftentimes for the wealthiest, we need to remember that President Kennedy believed in a society where Americans took care of one another. He fought to expand and lay the groundwork for the program, which of course became Medicare, which was enacted under President Johnson. He, of course, was a huge proponent of advancing civil rights, and President Kennedy proposed the Civil Rights Act, which became a landmark law in 1964. He supported the courts and the rule of law, which we know that President Kennedy worked tirelessly to enforce, of course, courts, support courts, and orders even sending U.S. Marshals and the National Guard to desegregate the University of Mississippi. Social Security was also critical to President Kennedy. He worked to expand Social Security to increase benefits and cover more people with disabilities. President Kennedy, over and over again, of course, believed that government could do big things. He invested in scientific discovery and challenged us to put a man on the moon. We know, and he knew, that our country was strongest as a global leader fighting for freedom and democracy. He believed in working through our alliances. And I want to make sure that the family also knows that we will work and always work to uplift President Kennedy's legacy and what he left for this country and his community. It's important that we follow the facts and that we work to continue and declassify oftentimes things that have been overclassified by particularly the FBI and the CIA in the past. And thank you, and I yield back.